thank you all for joining us for this webinar. I'll be kind of introing it and outroing it, and James will be doing the sort of main bulk of the content. So AI, I think everyone is talking about it at the moment in the news, in business, but it's only really recently where sort of companies have released sort of versions of AI that are usable in a day-to-day sense. So things like ChatGPT have become very common, but really we want to focus on Microsoft's new productivity tool, which is Copilot. Obviously, most of you guys use Microsoft business applications, and it's really about how Copilot can integrate with those applications to help you with sort of day-to-day tasks. So we're going to go through sort of the prerequisites for Copilot, and then in a bit more detail about how it can, I guess, influence your daily working life. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to James to talk you through that.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much indeed. And a very good afternoon to everybody. Welcome and thank you for giving up your time to be here today. I hope you find this interesting and informative and helpful for your next steps with AI. One thing I will say is we're recording this session, so if you have any questions, obviously you can pop those into the Q&A section. One thing to be mindful of whenever you join a live webinar is if you ask a question or if you participate, if you're on the call, there is a chance that during the recording your name will pop up. Those sort of things happen. So if you've any objection to that, obviously the advice is always to exit the call. However, we hope you will stay with us and enjoy what we have to put on. So let's talk about Copilot. To talk about Copilot, I want to do both sides of the conversation. I want to do the more challenging pieces that we need to be aware of, the steps that we should be taking, how we actually get started in a safe and secure manner. And then we can talk about the flashy, wonderful things that Copilot is able to do and how that can support us in a business as well. So across the course of the hour, we'll split it into two halves. We'll think about what we need to do. What is the Microsoft 365 Business Premium offering when it comes to Copilot, and why is that so important? But then we will get into what is Copilot for those who don't know. I'll give some examples of how it can help out in a business, and I'll show some demonstrations of the technology in action as well. We'll talk about a case study and give you some advice about how you can get started if you'd like to get started, whether it be today or very soon. So I think to start off, one point that we know is change is happening faster than ever, especially with the rise of AI. To stay competitive in the current landscape, it feels as though we need to get better at adapting quickly to change. I'd encourage everyone to think about how they cope with change currently, how you might need to cope with more change, and how you might need to support your team to cope with that. Because the one thing we can all agree on is that it's not going away. This genie is out the bottle, and I think everyone is now starting to understand that AI is going to play a big part in the future for everybody from a professional perspective, and possibly well beyond that too. It's just a matter of understanding how it fits right now and how we get started with it and how we get our people into these technologies without it being too stressful for them and too risky for the business and so on. So let's have a look at some of the challenges that we're hearing about. Some really from the SMB community more so than anywhere else, but hybrid work is still top of mind or very high up there. And for businesses, that looks like conversations about how we secure devices that are out in the wild. It looks like how we provide good access to get work done. But equally, it's about, should we be coming back to the office? How many days in the office are the right amount? Should we be offering remote work? What is best? How do I onboard staff if there's no one to hold their hand and show them how to do things? There's lots of puzzles and questions that have come out of this, and I think in our post-pandemic Britain, with COVID a reasonable distance behind us now, we're still feeling the effects of learning how to do that remote work and now balancing what's best. Certainly top of mind as well is AI and how it can be integrated. We've spoken about that already. And security is an increasingly prevalent conversation piece as well, because one thing I can assure you is that the adoption of AI in the cyber criminal landscape is really, really good. These guys are figuring out new and improved ways to launch attacks and conduct the old attacks better. So unfortunately, we're seeing security concerns rise, not fall, and we always need to do more. And we'll talk a bit about that as we go. With regards to Microsoft, one of their big messages is always about how can you make the best of what you're paying for, get the best of the tools that you're investing in, how can you do more with less? And Microsoft 365 and Business Premium in particular is a good way to summarize that conversation piece, because it includes quite a lot of different tools. So for those who've got less understanding of exactly what is involved in Microsoft 365, I'll just talk briefly about what that product is and what it does. It's actually a suite of products. You've got SKUs in Basic, Apps, Standard, and Business Premium, and those combine just the online services, just the applications, and then the applications and services together with Standard. And then with Business Premium, it also adds in these security and management tools as well to make your life easier when you're trying to get things done with your devices and your data. We'll talk a bit more about some of the specific security features later, but I don't want to dwell on this too much because I assume that a lot of you will already be relatively familiar. If you're not, please do feel free to ask questions. And I think one of the things to bear in mind is when you're investing in these packages, you start a timer, if you like, where there's a lot of value to be had in putting a piece of work together that says, well, let's evaluate the licenses that we've got. Let's look at the features that are in there, things like Planner, things like Viva, things like Bookings, these tools that people don't always talk about, they don't always know are there. And let's start thinking about how we can get those to work for the business. Because if we had a tool that allows us to set up specific appointment and schedule management, maybe that would free us up to do more. Maybe it would reduce the need for some other tool that we may be paying for. There's lots of conversations like that that tend to happen when you start looking at exactly what you're paying for. And if you're working with any Microsoft partner, a challenge that should always be on your mind is, am I getting the best value for what I'm paying for? And do I have a conversation about what the roadmap looks like, how I unlock that functionality, how I get the best? And that's not just productivity tools like this, it also applies to security features as well. And I think actually every business these days should have a security roadmap and a security plan. And whether it's very simple, it's early stages, and the earliest things that we should all be doing, I'll come on to in a minute, but we know what it is. It's things like MFA and single sign-on and protecting the data and protecting the devices. Or whether it's a slightly more evolved conversation where we've done the basics and we're now starting to think about, well, how do we go a bit further? How do we maybe start classifying our data so that we can use it more responsibly? Those are the kind of conversations that we need to have in the run up to Copilot. It's one thing to introduce an AI tool into your system, but you have to remember that intelligence is going to start crawling through your data, bringing it all together, helping your staff to find things. So there's the obvious concerns about, well, we don't want people to find stuff they shouldn't find, so we need to make sure the right data is in the right place. But we even more so don't want people who are outside the organization who've maybe found a way to get in using somebody's credentials. We really don't want them to be able to find very quickly and easily things like financial documents and things like that. So although Copilot's a very exciting opportunity, there are some responsibilities that have to be accounted for. So what do we mean by that? Well, productivity and collaboration is great. The AI side of this is great, but it is that security and management piece that you're paying for within Business Premium. And that's where we need to turn on some useful features. I say this because Microsoft relatively recently announced that Copilot would be available to people on the basic Microsoft 365 SKU and on standard and so forth. So you don't have to invest in Business Premium to have Copilot. And there are businesses out there who maybe are trialing Copilot who have not got Business Premium licenses. And whilst I'm okay with that, I do think you're missing the tools that you need to do it responsibly. And whether you're getting those somewhere else or whether you're getting them from Business Premium, I want to call out what those features are and how you can make sure you've got something doing that job. So let's take a look at what some of those useful features are. And actually, if we look at the threat that people are dealing with, well, there's two forms of attack that are massively popular in the UK at the minute. Actually, the very top of the list is phishing, but I think everybody knows what phishing is at this point. The trouble is we're still struggling to deal with it as a threat, and it's growing year on year. So phishing, for those who have no idea, is the phishing with a PH, and it's people sending fake emails that ask for bank details or ask for sign-in information. And people get fooled and they click on links and they give up stuff they shouldn't be giving up. And that causes a breach. What happens when a breach has been made sometimes is this next attack, ransomware attacks, where a business's data will be encrypted by a malicious actor. And they will then get in touch to say, you need to pay the ransom and we'll unencrypt your data. Now, there's loads of problems that can start to happen if you agree to pay ransoms, or if you are in this position in the first place. Even if you get your data encrypted, it's certainly not private anymore, is it, once someone else has gotten access to it. So there's some things we can do that will massively improve. And I would say absolute bare minimum that everybody should have in place really is email protection that stops these kind of links coming through in the first place, so that we can try and cut out the phishing issues at source, and equally backup solutions as well. If you found yourself in a position like this one day, we hope it will never happen, but there are so many businesses who can't recover because they haven't done the basic steps of just getting their data backed up. So if a threat like this comes in, they can just wipe everything and start again. If you're not in a position where you can do that, that's a priority. You really want to be able to recover your business in the event of one of these issues happening, so that you don't have to pay a ransom fee. Okay, and the single most important thing that you can do today is the same as it's been for a few years now, which is turning on multi-factor authentication. I would say to everybody, I've heard every excuse under the sun, talking about how it makes it more difficult for people to get access to the resources, how it starts causing problems in workflows. I've heard it all, and I would say to everybody who knows somebody who is challenging this, would you run your bank account without multi-factor authentication? I haven't seen a banking system that allows you to do that. You have to have MFA in place. And the reason for that's really simple. Protecting your bank information is incredibly important, so the highest levels of security are applied. It should be the same for our business data as well. So wherever you are in your journey, either you've done this, and hats off to you, thank you for making people's data safer. If you haven't had the chance to get this done yet, it needs to become a priority. MFA shuts down so many of the modern attacks that we face. It can quite literally protect you from nearly 100% of the attacks that you'll see. And that's just because phishing attacks are so prevalent in the market. Beyond that, and assuming you've heard enough about MFA, and I think probably most of us have, but there's tools like conditional access as well. And conditional access does exactly what it says on the tin. It will provide people with access to the data or the resources on the network that they want on condition. And the conditions might be that they're in a particular location, so we know it's a safe office. It could be that they have a device that's in a fit condition, it's run updates, or it's registered against the business, we know which device it is. It could be that it's a specific user account. They maybe are challenged with things like MFA. So if they can pass those conditions, then and only then are they granted access to the data, to the resources on the network that they need. That's an excellent way for us to start protecting the data from outside interference or from unwelcome visitors. And that's an excellent tool that we can be thinking about applying as we start to prepare to deploy Copilot. So conditional access is something to put on your list. Some other things to put on your list as well. I talk again about phishing and these links. Microsoft 365 Business Premium includes Defender 365. There are lots of Defender for this and Defender for that products out there. It's Defender for Business, which we really are talking about here. And one of the features that it includes is this malicious link detection, so that it can actually see where a link is trying to take you. It can go and check that link, and it can determine whether or not that's dangerous without your computer ever being exposed to that threat. So that's all done out in Microsoft's cloud. They evaluate the threat and then make a decision as to whether it's safe for your computer to go to that site or not. Some people will say to me, does that slow down the browsing experience? And really, I'm sure it does mathematically slow it down, but it's certainly not noticeable when you're using the device. So tools like this can offer an extra layer of intelligent protection that prevent you from falling into some of the most common traps. There are tools that go even further still. And the next tool is Purview Information Protection. This is a tool that allows you to provide document level data protection. What that means is that you're baking the security into the file. So if you've got a spreadsheet that's got sensitive information, or a Word document with sensitive information, this is going to recognize that that data is protected. It allows you to classify, whether manually or automatically, that your documents are maybe confidential or secret or financial data, and protect them accordingly. Because this is data level protection, the protection lives in the file. it doesn't matter if somebody is able to get their hands on that file, or if somebody emails a file to a journalist, or somebody copies a file off on a USB stick. It really doesn't matter, because wherever they are, however they've gotten their hands on that file, they'll need to authenticate to open that document. And if they can't authenticate, they can't get in, that data is going to be safe. So tools like information protection, again, incredibly good for making sure that as you go towards tools like Copilot, you're able to say, well, we know where our financial documents are. We know where the human resources documents are. We know where the confidential information is. It's all classified, and Copilot is going to know that it's not to include these documents in its results when it starts looking. So information protection is one of the tools that allows us to classify and protect the data that we need to keep safe as we start to unlock the rest of our data to Copilot. Beyond that, there's one last tool I'll mention, which is cloud application discovery. And this is a tool that allows a business to look at the tools that are being used. There's a couple of good reasons for this. One, you wouldn't want people using apps that are unsafe. And I can see on this list apps like Mega, which are sort of frowned upon for data sharing just because of how unsafe the typical file standard on that platform is. But going forward as well, you might say, well, Google Drive surely is safe. And it might well be, but for Copilot, we want our data to be in SharePoint or in OneDrive. That's where Copilot looks for the data. It's how people work with that data as well. So if we had high figures here telling us that we had an extensive amount of data in Google Drive, we'd need to make a decision as to whether we are totally fine with that, or whether we want to start thinking about moving that data out of those spaces so that we can use it with Copilot. So the applications for this tool are pretty broad. They're mostly about preventing the use of what we call shadow IT, tools and services that we don't really want used in the workspace. This will help us to identify where those are and what we can do about it as well. If there's stuff in here you don't recognize as well, I would totally understand if people are not familiar with, SugarSync, for instance. You can click onto any of these items and it will take you through to an analysis of that particular software package, and it will tell you how much of a threat it poses to your business, whether it's sort of standard, what sort of replacements exist for it, that sort of thing. So that's cloud app discovery, and that's enough applications. I think we've seen enough applications across the market, and I'm very sympathetic, because if you want to try and find best of breed security solutions as a business, you're now dealing with such a wall of software solutions from a almost limitless supply of security vendors, that it's incredibly hard to find the right tools, and it's very hard to understand how they're going to interact. Are they going to cause each other problems? What sort of skills and experience am I going to need from my engineers to be able to manage these solutions? There's lots of quite difficult questions there. So I think for me, one of the key takeaways I would give to anybody is, when you're looking at this kind of stuff, a big cheat that you can employ is to look at companies like Microsoft, who have to provide endpoint from beginning to end across a variety of platforms, who have to pay attention to compliance, who have to take care of security, who have a lot to lose if these things go wrong. Well, that can save you an awful lot of time in terms of where you may need to invest in a solution. You can trust Microsoft to have done the due diligence for you. So looking then at endpoint security, certainly if we're going to open tools up to AI, we also need to make sure that everywhere that we use those tools is safe. And one of those locations is mobile devices. So although everything in the Microsoft stack is agnostic, it works on Windows, it works on Apple, it works on Android and iOS, it works on virtual machines, whether they're in Windows 365 or AVD. You can even bring in solutions from Google Cloud Platform and Amazon if you want to as well. So it's totally holistic and totally agnostic. But that starts to mean then that we can think about how we protect the devices. And one of the tools that will do that is a tool called Intune. And this particular feature, mobile application management, or MAM, used through Intune, allows you to look at a mobile phone as a device that can have a discrete personal and work location on the phone. So you're kind of seeing that visualized here. This phone is a BYOD device, probably. This is where it tends to make the most sense in a BYOD environment, because on a corporate phone, you would probably just not allow personal use. Whereas on a bring your own device scenario, you would allow personal use, but you'd want to protect the work data. So that work data is separated into a private space on the phone, and it's not allowed to move information between the personal space and the business space. So you can't, for instance, copy from Word on your work section of the phone over to a personal OneDrive, you'd have to save it to the correct place, which is OneDrive for Business. So these areas are segregated. And what that means is if somebody leaves the business or we lose the phone, the business has the reassurance that they can delete all of that business space on the phone. They can initiate a factory reset if they want to, but they can wipe the business data independently. So that's really good if you've got someone who's left the business, you want to wipe that data, but of course you don't want to wipe their personal emails, their personal photos, things like that. So very popular for BYOD scenarios. And that's really it with regards to the Microsoft 365 Business Premium overview that I wanted to do. And I hope what that tells you is there's quite a few conversations to be had around what we can do with the stack to protect our data, to protect our devices, and to protect our users as we start to go forward to these more intelligent solutions that are going to maybe expose some vulnerabilities that we didn't know we had if we're not careful. One of the benefits of looking at this within the Business Premium stack is that most of those tools have other paid for counterparts in the market. And if you're paying for 2 or 3 of these, you'll very quickly get to a point where actually you'll start to question, well, would we be saving money if we actually just turned on the features in Business Premium that we're paying for elsewhere? So that's something to think about. And if you need a piece of advice or guidance or demonstrations around this, have a chat with your account manager and the guys at Freestyle will help you out with that. So that's the first part. Now let's start to think about Copilot. And before I do, I'm going to take a very, very quick detour back to the meeting just to make sure there's no questions. It looks like we're all good. As a reminder, if you do have questions, there's a Q&A panel. You can pop them in there and we'll have a look at those and try and get them answered for you. So Copilot. Well, what is Copilot? Well, Copilot is AI, and I'm often asked, what exactly is AI? So I don't want to get into definitions, but essentially it's intelligence that we make. And whether it's speech recognition or computer vision or weather forecasting or large language models like ChatGPT is a very popular one right now, the rate with which AI solutions are growing in capability, usability, affordability is really quite staggering. And I didn't think we'd be having this conversation. I didn't really think I'd still be working in tech when functional AI landed. I thought I'd be retired or possibly dead, that it would be decades from now, really. And what strikes me as incredibly ironic is that some of these tools have come about in quite a funny way as well. If you think about GPT, which seems to have made the breakthrough, let me just I'll bring up this next image. ChatGPT has had an unprecedented level of growth. And if you go back 5 or 10 years and you were to ask the tech industry who are the leaders in AI, everybody would have said Google. And Google discarded transformer technology. They made it open source because they didn't see any value to it. And it was that piece of information that formed the cornerstone upon which OpenAI built ChatGPT. So unwittingly, they gave away the keys to the kingdom. And as a result of that, OpenAI's progress with ChatGPT has been absolutely staggering. And yeah, their documentation on transformer technology is kind of the root of all of that, which is what the T in GPT stands for, generative pre-trained transformers. So that's quite interesting. And we cannot stress enough, we're at the absolute beginning of a journey with AI. And I liken it to mobile phones. You can see here, it took 16 years for us to get 100 million users of mobile phones. And when they started out, they were big, they were clunky, they were bricks, they had big antennas, the batteries didn't last very long. And over the course of those 16 years, just look at the technology we have available to us today. You really can't describe it as a mobile phone anymore. It's so much more than that. They're so much more powerful and so much more functional. This adoption aside, if we look at how the market is reacting to all of this, it's absolutely fascinating to me to look at share prices where you are relating to companies involved in AI. And what you're seeing here is the share price for Microsoft and NVIDIA. Those following the news will have noticed earlier this week that NVIDIA actually surpassed Microsoft as the largest company in the world by market capitalization. So Microsoft has sat atop that tree since January, and NVIDIA have rapidly closed in thanks to AI technology. What that means for me is people don't invest in technology unless they see a future that goes, quite a way down the line, normally 10 years or so. And the level of investment into Microsoft and into NVIDIA is absolutely staggering. So there's a lot of confidence that AI is here to stay and it's going to make a positive impact. So what does that mean to our question? What is Copilot? Well, for all intents and purposes, Microsoft have done something that nobody else has at this point, and they've made AI commercially accessible to everyday users in the applications that we use day to day. And I do mean Word and Excel and PowerPoint and Outlook and those day-to-day tools that lots and lots of people use all the time. So what Copilot are we talking about? And this is something that's worth getting your head around. There's quite a few different types of Copilot out there. And we could be talking about Copilot Pro, which bizarrely is a consumer version of Copilot, which you pay for as a home user, and it gives you advanced Copilot features in the home. It's called Copilot Pro, but it's a consumer release. You've got Windows Copilot, which is Copilot that's baked into the Windows operating system. You could be on Bing and you could be using Copilot there as well. But when people talk about Copilot in a business sense, the product they're referring to is Copilot for Microsoft 365. That is the version of Copilot that you pay for, and it includes adding Copilot capabilities to Word, to Excel, to Outlook, to those applications that you know and love. There are countless others, and they do the same kind of thing for other types of application. So Sales Copilot adds this functionality to Dynamics for Sales, for example. There are tools for security, there are tools for developers, and so on. But for simplicity's sake, we are going to focus on Copilot for Microsoft 365. So how can that actually help us? Well, the patterns we're seeing are pretty undeniable. The pace and volume of work have skyrocketed since 2020. We have a lot of people saying that they don't have enough time or energy to do their job. On any given workday, the heaviest users that we do research with suggest that they need a lot more meetings and a lot more emails to get stuff done. They're typically in 3 times more meetings than they were in 2020. And some people are using up to 11 applications in a single day to get their work done as well. So the amount that we're doing has gone up a lot since 2020. And I think we've essentially learned how to be much more productive remotely because we had to for survival purposes. And it's all these years later that we're still finding that we've not really let that go. We're still working at this kind of frantic pace. And people are constantly telling me, I feel tired. I don't think I've ever found the year to be as busy as it is right now. It all feels quite hectic. So we know that people want a bit of help. And what that looks like in the world of AI is people telling us that they would love to try AI solutions to try and find ways to do their work smarter. People telling us that they are using AI tools, whether they have been told they can or not. People that would actually pass over large amounts of their work to an AI if they could. So the appetite for this is there, whether we've authorized it or not, or whether we accept it or not. So it is quite important that we make sure that the tools that are being used are recognized tools that don't put company data at risk. And Copilot will do that. It will allow you to use the latest models, so things like GPT-4 from OpenAI and DALL-E for visual stuff from the same company. It protects corporate data. So there's 2 things it does that are really important from my perspective. The first is it's transparent, which means if you ask Copilot for a question and an answer, it will give you the answer, but it will cite where it got the answer from. That's incredibly important because it's a co-pilot. It's not a pilot. That means you can sanity check the answer that you get. You can see the sources that were used to create that answer, and you can make sure that they're accurate. You can make sure they're fair. You can make sure there's no bias. I've seen examples of these technologies looking at some of the image generation tools. A test I've seen done in the past to analyze for bias is asking it to draw 50 pictures of doctors. And you can draw 50, you can draw 100, you can draw 1,000 pictures of doctors on some of these tools, and they will all return thousands of white, middle-aged male men in doctor's coats. That's what it thinks a doctor looks like. And you can see there's an enormous amount of room for negativity and failure with these models if we don't look out for those kind of biases. That's just image generation, but it could absolutely skew the results on trying to get advice for how to recruit the right people for a job, how to approve people for a loan, how to improve security in areas with underfunded policing. There's an awful lot of scope for how our inherent biases and issues in humanity could affect these models. So Microsoft is very committed to correcting those. It's an incredibly important part of the decision process for the tools that you select, that you understand how the decisions are made. And the best way to do that is to pick tools where you know that the supplier is under more pressure than you are. Microsoft would be very, very high on that list. And the next thing that it does that's incredibly important is its protection for commercial data. And what that means is that when you engage Copilot from a business perspective and you are paying for it, you have the option to turn on or off the tools. You get these sliders at the top, you get these alerts to let you know that your data is being protected. Commercially protected data means that your prompts aren't going into a list, into an engine to train an AI model. So your data is not helping that model to get better. It's not becoming a part of the answers that others are going to get when they ask similar questions to you. So your stuff stays private. It's also not sending your information out into the internet. Copilot is able to bring information in from the internet, and you can choose by flicking these switches whether you want it to go out to the internet and add the knowledge of the internet to its answer, or whether you want it to focus entirely on the resources available inside your network on your business network. So you can choose how far and wide you will go with your Copilot questions. And that's another very, very important feature you do not see across all the other solutions on the market. So again, if you want to stay safe and you want to stay transparent, you want to stay ethical, you need to pick the right tools to do that. It's not to say Microsoft is the only one, but I can assure you that they are prioritizing that very heavily. So more practically speaking, what can AI and Copilot do to benefit businesses? I like to refer to something called the hats, not heads principle, which is to say that in any business, especially smaller businesses, most people are called upon to do things that go beyond their role. They need to learn new skills. They need to try new things. A salesperson may have to do some marketing. An engineer might have to do some telephony support. When you've got to go outside your comfort zone, it's incredibly helpful to have tools like Copilot that can give you ideas of what best practice looks like for this particular topic, how to make an advert, how to recruit somebody, how to put a job description together. Copilot can help answer all of those questions. So for businesses that don't have a ton of resource in people, they can use Copilot to help fill in the blanks. That, for me, does lead to better productivity of those smaller workforces. A lot of people will say, do you think Copilot and AI is going to stop people getting jobs? Is it going to hurt the job market? I think it will change the job market. I think certainly businesses won't need to hire people that they may have needed to hire without Copilot. I equally think that people with AI knowledge and with AI tools available to them are going to vastly outperform their competitors in businesses who don't have those tools available to them. I also think as well, right, if we zoom in on this photo, I can see people with hands coming out the side of them, and it's not as perfect as you maybe initially think it is. So there is still hope for humanity and certainly for attention to detail. And it reminds us again that it's a Copilot. You always need to check its work to make sure that it's done a good job. But it looks pretty good when you don't look too closely. So let's start looking at some examples of how this works in specific technology, the things like Word. And what you're seeing here is somebody proposing or drafting a proposal rather based on OneNote meeting notes. So they reference those and they ask it to build a proposal. It looks at the documents that are available to it. One is a set of meeting notes from OneNote, and the other is a Word document that they're using to put together a product roadmap for this customer. It combines those and it puts together a Word document. Copilot's really good at this. Drafting documents is one of the things it does best. It's a word generator at heart, and it does this incredibly well. One of the things you need to bear in mind is that you need to have these files and these notes in your OneDrive or in your business's SharePoint to be able to do this. But it can do that for you. It can build documents out very, very quickly, very effectively. You'd still check it, but it could save you hours and hours of work. Let's have a look at PowerPoint, because one of the common things that you can do, let's say you've built a proposal document like this, you might then decide to build a pitch. And PowerPoint's an interesting one because I think it shows some of the positives and some of the weaknesses of Copilot as well. You can draft a presentation, and you can see this example is literally building a presentation by saying, build me a pitch deck out of the proposal that we put together. And it's doing that very, very quickly. What you're not seeing, though, is that you can't apply a business template to this presentation. That feature doesn't exist yet within Copilot, and I'm always asked about it. You'll also find that somebody who's really good with PowerPoint is going to say, well, I could have probably built a better presentation. I'm sure they could. But what this does is it makes people who don't have loads of skill with PowerPoint very much capable of putting something together in a few minutes that will otherwise take them, the best part of a day. Yes, you can drag your content into other decks, into template decks. Those features will come. Right now, this is about making somebody with very little expertise quite good. It's not about making somebody who's already very good even better. You'll find that Copilot is more suited for those who are less experienced with the products. And let's take that on into Excel, where the same is true here. Again, if you're an extremely powerful user within Excel, you are not going to be blown away with what Copilot can do. However, if you've got no experience of Excel, you're now able to look at a table within Copilot within Excel, and you can analyze that table. You can ask it questions and it will pull results. You can generate charts. You can add conditional formats. You can insert pivot tables, and you can filter that data in ways that you would have no idea how to do. So again, if you've got little expertise within the product, Copilot will make you much, much better at that product, and it will save you a lot of time. The next is Outlook. There was big news last week with Microsoft releasing the announcement that you no longer had to use the new Outlook in order to benefit from Copilot. That's a very welcome update. I think lots of people prefer the older Outlook style. In here, you're seeing some examples of what Copilot can do. It's scanning through the emails that have been received, and it is allowing this person to catch up. And you can see it adding a bulleted list of what's been going on and what they can do. It will summarize conversations. It will allow you to draft responses, and it will allow you to tailor those responses depending on who you're sending them to. I'll show you a couple of examples of that in just a moment, but Outlook is one of the stronger tools for me. It's one that you'll likely have a lot of immediate use cases for. So how can you get started? Well, it depends. If you've got Copilot, obviously you can go and try some Copilot things today, and then it really just becomes a matter of understanding what your plan is. If you don't have Copilot, but you're still interested in AI, you can go and freely try AI solutions like Copilot today. You can go to bing.com right now, and you can look for this Copilot icon on the site, and you can start to use it. Just bear in mind that if you're using Copilot through Bing, you do not have commercial data protection, so you should not put sensitive information into that website. But if you want to go and ask it a question such as, how do I prompt? How do I learn to prompt? What can I do with Copilot? Absolutely, you can go and start doing that today. Equally, once you start to get a bit more experience with Copilot, you can go and look at Copilot Lab. And this is a curated set of assets that help people to understand what sort of things I can do in Word or in PowerPoint or Excel. And it will give you some ideas for new prompt ideas that you maybe haven't realized yet. So there is a reasonably good suite of assets available already from Microsoft that will help you to learn and get better at Copilot. Just bear in mind, if you're not paying, it's not commercially protected. Be careful what you put in. So let's look at a particular use case by role. One of the more common areas for people to introduce Copilot into a business is in the sales team. There's a perception that there's a lot of people there who do a lot of writing and a lot of Copilot beneficial work. Also, it's a lot easier to see whether they're having a good time with it because, if they have a good time, sales go up in theory. So it's easy to generate a metric. So sellers can do quite a lot of things, like quickly getting a typical objection to a problem they may see with a product. They can ask Copilot to go and find them a credible objection to that, or an objection handle rather to that as well. They might be working with the marketing team, and they might want to understand exactly how a particular product works, so they can learn from Copilot by asking it questions. They can test their ideas of how they sell a product by practicing their negotiation with Copilot. There's all kinds of things you can do as a seller. And actually, when you start talking to sales teams who are using AI, an awful lot of them start using AI to help them find the right information to prepare for their sales calls. But it doesn't stop there. They can go right the way through their workflow using AI tools that live in Bing Chat and Microsoft 365, right the way through to building pitch decks, through to summarizing the meetings that they have with their customers in Teams, through to drafting proposals for them or sending them out in email as well. There's so many applications where there is an immediate use case for a sales professional that it's rapidly become one of the starting areas for Copilot. These kind of assets exist all over the place. You can get these sorts of day in the life models that you can trial out with your business as well. And I can share some information. I'll be sharing a PDF copy of this deck for everybody who's attending today. You'll be able to get by role things like sales, things like HR and operations, all that sort of stuff. So you can look at some of the examples for how people are doing stuff. My advice, just go and play. Be commercially sensitive, but go to Bing. Go try it out as soon as you can, because the sooner you get to building those skills with how prompting works, with how AI works, the more likely you're going to be able to engage with these tools as time goes on. And it's moving so quickly that I don't know that there's an awful lot of time to lose. So Next, let's have a look at a customer case study. This is a business called Canopius. They've been introducing AI with Copilot. They're a Microsoft flagship case study on the Microsoft website. You can go and look this up and others at customers.microsoft.com. And what's interesting about this is Canopius are an insurance company and reinsurance company. They've got an awful lot of data and they use that data to do their job, as I'm sure you can imagine. Well, they've been able to use this to generate more rapid insights so they can react more to changing market conditions. They can leverage these tools now to be a bit more successful with regards to how they generate new workflows that allow them to sort of absorb all that information and quickly make decisions off the back end of it as well. So it's been fascinating to watch, how they put the tools into place, but also how they approach the human side of that conversation as well. So lots of training, lots of initiatives, lots of best practice, and lots to learn from. So again, more details are available, but equally, if you're interested to start your customer journey today or relatively soon, the absolute best thing you could do would be to talk to the team. I'm going to introduce Ben to talk about that in a second, but before I do, I said I would show you an example. So let's take a quick look at a meeting recap, using Copilot. I'm just going to launch a safe version of this. So this is a Teams meeting window, a typical window, and what we're going to do is essentially bring Copilot in to assist with this meeting. So we've launched the Copilot tool into the side of the window. It's worth noting it looks a bit like a chat box. Do not mistake this for actual chat. Otherwise, you will be quite literally asking your questions into chat for everybody to see. Copilot is just for you. So no one can see what you're asking, which means it's okay if you say, hey, I nodded off what happened in the past 5 minutes, whereas that would not be okay in the chat. You've got some prompting down here as well that you can select, and this will allow you to do things like recap the meeting, and it will go back through the conversation. It'll look at the transcript and it will pull out the things that have happened in this particular conversation. And we can start then to sort of scroll through these and see what we think. And we can add a question. Who is tasked with finding a new bike mechanic? And we can send that into Copilot. So instead of asking it on the call, if we feel awkward, we can ask Copilot and it will tell us that it's Isaiah who has been selected with this job. We can get some follow-up questions if we want to participate in the conversation and we feel we might have missed stuff. This will give us some ideas to talk about budgets or things like this. And Copilot won't give you a question that it knows has already been asked. So you're not going to look silly if you ask these questions typically. And that's one of the integrations that you'll see in Copilot. Coming out of the call, you've then got this ability to go back to chat. And you can see the history of all of your calls is here. They'll now include this option at the top that says recap. I can go into this. I've got a video recording. I've got the transcript. I've got the participation so I can see who did what. But I can also go back and look at the summary of the meeting notes, and Copilot has got these enabled. That means I can bring Copilot back in and I can continue asking questions. So once again, I can go over to here and I can select more prompts. And I can, for instance, list the action items from this meeting. It'll go back through that transcript and it will bullet all of the actions that it's detected within that meeting. Absolutely everything with regards to AI is incredibly impressive. Is it all 100% perfect all the time? No, it's absolutely not. So I'll reiterate the point. When you start learning these tools, get used to the idea that you've got to sanity check and double check it's working and make sure everything is as you would expect it to be. But I cannot tell you the amount of time and energy it saves to have Copilot take meeting notes that you just then have to go and make sure it's got everything that you had, and then you can copy paste them out in a really neat format to share with people on email or on on Teams. So that's a demo of this particular feature within Teams. So what I'd like to do here is just pass back to my esteemed colleague Ben, who will tell you a little bit about what you can do today if you would like to get involved with Copilot. Ben, over to you, and let me know if there's any questions.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, James. That was really interesting. Also, apologies for the fact that my LinkedIn profile picture is the picture on that side. I promise I'm not that self-absorbed. It was done by my marketing team, who obviously thought that was the most kind of presentable picture of me, but obviously my contact details are on there as well. So yeah, thank you to everyone for joining. I hope you found this webinar as sort of interesting and insightful as I did. Whether you're an experienced Copilot user or you're just learning about it for the first time. I could see we had a mixture of kind of new customers and existing customers joining for this webinar, which is great. It's great to see. It's great to see some new faces. Obviously, my contact details are there, so please feel free to reach out to me after this. The reason we ran this webinar is because we want to sort of position ourselves as thought leaders for your organisation. So we'll be doing more of these moving forward. So if there's an area of IT that you're particularly interested in, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or whoever you deal with at Freestyle, because we want to help, we want to educate you, and if there's an area you're interested in, then I'm sure we can find someone to deliver a webinar such as this. So also, for those of you who don't know me, obviously my name and contact details are there, and for the new businesses that have joined this webinar, a bit basic information about Freestyle. We're an IT MSP that provides support, consultancy, procurement, and engineering services to all manner of organisations. We like to cover the entire kind of IT spectrum. So we welcome any feedback you have regarding the session. I'm sure Ali or myself will, for those of you who know Ali, reach out to you for some feedback after this. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to email. But yeah, I hope you found this useful overall, and yeah, fingers crossed we'll be talking to you more about Copilot moving forward.